By this time he had already become 90 plus, and it was towards his last stage of life. Now, one of the things that Krishnamacharya started to realize was he didn't have much time remaining. And one of the big missions of his life was to revive or to restore yoga to its full capacity. He had already done a great degree in this first part of his life, but there was still one domain that he had still not taught many people. This is the concept of yoga as a spiritual practice. Yoga as a spiritual practice, and this is what he called as SvahaYoga, a self-discovery practice. So here he started to introduce for the first time, again, chants and mantras in asana practices, which is a very old system but was very reserved for a very few. Very reserved for a very few because mantras were not very easily shared. So he started introducing this to people so that people would benefit from this. The same thing done in pranayama is also a very old system which is called Sagarbha pranayama or Samantraka pranayama. Again, it has a lot of benefits because we make the pranayama doubly potent. We have the benefit of pranayama and the benefit of mantras. This was something that was done as well, very traditionally in the past, but was not very often taught to a lot of people because of its potent nature. So, but he started to do that to some people so that this door would be open, the door towards spirituality. Another thing he started to do was started to teach people what is called nyasa along with mantras. Nyasa is a very careful gestures that are very carefully chosen, very precisely done. And he started to teach these to some of the people as well, especially to some of the women students who were coming to him. And most importantly, he started to teach people meditative practices. This was a very phenomenal thing because this is something which he wanted to open the door for people to realize or experience later. Another thing he wrote, which I don't have it on the slide, is that in this time was the time when he started to write or create his best works. Two of his best works, he wrote a number of books, but two of his best works, one is a commentary on the Yoga Sutra called Yoga Valli. He wrote in this era. In the last part where he dictated this commentary on Yoga Sutra to my father who was writing it down, and this is a very fascinating commentary that he wrote. And the other thing which he wrote, as I told you, is some kind of a spiritual connection that his family shares with the Vedanta tradition. So he also wrote a commentary on the Vedanta philosophy at this time. So this was the best part of his work that he did very, very late in his life. Very, very late in his life. There are probably a million reasons for that. But he wanted to do that so that there is something for the future generations even if he is not there. Mainly because he wanted to open the door of yoga as a spiritual process to the future generations. Well, a very fascinating benefit of all of this is when we start to evolve in a spiritual capacity, somehow our hearing and listening becomes better. When I say hearing and listening, I should just put the big term, perception becomes better. This is also something Yoga Sutra philosophy talks about. It says that when you realize the great potential that you have inside, your senses become much, much more refined. So this is something which happens, and this is something which I think some of the people who are learning with him also started to experience at this time. And then it starts to integrate yoga's multiple tools into one potent practice. You must understand one thing. Classically, yoga was not at all practiced like we are seeing in the world today. It was not that asana was separate, breathing was separate, mantra was separate, etc. All the tools of yoga forms an integrative approach where all the yoga angas come together. That is the very definition of the word yoga. It's a union. It's a union of many of these tools. It is not a separation. You can't say, well, we do asana, we don't do pranayama, or we do mantra, we don't do meditation. It's actually something that integrates all of this, and then only yoga becomes most potent. If some of you have benefited from one tool of yoga like asana, Imagine what is possible when these different aspects of yoga come together. This is what he wanted us to experience, and perhaps this is something that may happen in the next few years, long after he is gone. So this is another fascinating concept that he left with us, and this was towards the last part of his life, because he started to see that the concept of spiritual search was missing in this time, especially in India. It started to decline, and I think many more of you outside India are interested in spiritual traditions than people in India. But we have the advantage of population, so even a small percentage is a huge number. But if you look at it as a percentage of population, I think many people outside India have some kind of spiritual search. It may not be through religion, but through other forms. And this is something which is missing now in my country, but hopefully it will revive. And this is the reason for that he left this door open for future generations. And that's when in 1989, on the 28th of February, he passed away when he was about 101. And there's a lot of things that happened before and after this, and this is the end it came. So if you look at his work, it goes through a period of 6 different kinds of teaching, each one for a certain purpose. So when we say, or when we understand that we would like to understand the yoga of Krishnamacharya, it becomes very important for us to understand all of these aspects. Only then we can understand what his teaching represents. So this is something which I hope some of you will do, and I actually prepared that. That's the number of slides I actually prepared, because I thought it was only 1 hour. But if you want to speak more, we can speak more, or if you have some questions, we can have some questions. But this is exactly what we have as the introduction to the yoga of Krishnamacharya. So thank you. Maybe we take a few minutes pause and you can ask questions. Thank you.
प्रकाशक्रियास्थितिशीलं भूतेन्द्रियात्मकं भोगापवर्गार्थं दृश्यम्